paper, and it's been a number of things. And I believe Stephanie was 2006, four that we came Coke. Yeah.
Yes, there was a little bit of complication between 2004 and 2006, but
that's right. Actually, I think Coke bought Brunswick Cellulose before they bought GP, and through the process. We are one of the largest fluff mills in North America. We have a couple of the other ones. We've got one in Alabama, and we've also got one in Mississippi. But we produce almost 1 million tons a year of product that we ship all over the world. We are located on about 1,300 acres of property. We generate most of our own power, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get into the process. We currently have about 650 employees in the mill, and on an average day, we'll have another 400 contractors in the mill working on various things, some of that being environmental type activities. And we are the largest taxpayer in Glenn County. So what is fluff? So fluff is basically a cellulose fiber that comes from trees. It is used mostly in absorbent products like baby diapers, adult incontinence, feminine hygiene products. And one of the unique properties of the southern pine fiber, it's very long and it's fairly coarse, and it gives the best absorbency of any fiber in the world. So we have an advantage in the Southeast where we have loblolly and southern pine to produce this. And again, we ship it all over the world and it makes the best products for that. It is, and you can see the picture here. I don't know, do I have a pointer on here?
Yeah, it's a little red line.
There we go. So you can see that this is what we make at the mill, and then we make it in smaller packages, which I'll show you in a little bit. And then we ship that to customers who take it and put it through machines that basically turn it into something that looks like cotton balls, hence the name fluff. And then that's what they put in the products. Some other things, again, it's very absorbent. It also goes into filters, and it can also be used as a thickener in many kind of chemicals and stuff. You know, example of that would be dishwashing liquid, shampoo, toothpaste. A lot of those products have a cellulose derivative in it to give it the viscosity so that the toothpaste will stay on your toothbrush when you put it on it. The process, I'll talk a little bit about that. We use what is called the craft pulping process, and we start with trees. At the mill here in Brunswick, we use 100% yellow southern pine. We don't use any hardwood in the facility here. Our average tree age is probably in the range from about 14 to 16 years up to about 30 years. Most all of our wood comes from pine plantations, and we'll start thinning those at about 14, 16 years, and then later we'll grow them up to 24 to 30 years for lumber. And part of that, we call it chip and saw. You get a combination of chips and lumber out of that. But that's a continuous process, and 95% of our wood is coming off of plantation pines, which has got this, on average, about a 20-year growth cycle that's going on. We take the trees, we bring them in, we bring in both chips and logs. We put them through we have a log yard where it takes the bark off. Then we chip them up into what we call wood chips that we put in the digester. We also take the bark that comes off of the log. We actually burn that in some of our boilers to generate power, consuming all of the material. And then it goes into the cooking process, which is very much like a pressure cooker, if you will. We put the chips in there, we put some chemicals in it. It takes about 3 hours, and then we call it blowing. We blow that material, and when we blow it, the chips turn into fibers. It separates them into fibers. And then we go through a number of washing and purification processes where we take what we call black liquor. We take the chemicals and a lot of the organic material. We concentrate that. We burn it in our recovery boilers to recover both the energy value as well as the chemicals from it. The reason most of your pulp operations today are craft process because it's very efficient. Again, we recover the energy, and we also recover 98% of all the chemicals. We take the chemicals, put them in the cooker. We take that liquor, concentrated, burn it in a recovery boiler, and we have something comes out of the bottom of a recovery boiler that looks like lava coming out of a volcano. We take that, mix it with water, and recover all those chemicals, and basically turn it back around the cycle. The last thing we do after we purify it and make basically cotton, if you will, we dry it on a machine, which converts it into rolls and ultimately ship it to our customers. So that's a little bit about the process. That whole process from the time we put a chip in the digester until we have a roll coming off the machine is about 24 hours. So it's a very long, continuous process. This is the example of, this is what the finished product looks like. It's a roll about, again, they're about this tall and anywhere from 10 inches wide to 40 inches wide. They weigh anywhere from a couple 100 pounds up to a ton. And this is what we ship to our customers. And again, they have processes to take it, put it through, they beat it and basically turn it into, if you will, cotton. And again, there's three components in a tree. You got cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin. And cellulose is the same thing that you would get in a cotton ball that grows on a cotton plant. And what we're doing in this purification process is taking out the lignin and the hemicellulose and basically purifying it so that we've got the product that we can sell as fluff. Once we've got it in these rolls, we have multiple ways to ship it. We have some going by truck. We have majority of our product going by ocean-going container. We export about 85% of our material. We export a larger amount from Brunswick here because of our proximity than our other two facilities do that are located in Alabama and Mississippi. They supply more in North America, in South America and Central America. Again, trucks, these are containers. We do ship some by rail, and we have a little bit which we call break bulk. And that's where you see these individual rolls are picked up with this vacuum device here and actually loaded into the cargo hold on a ship. And that actually goes out of the Brunswick port here in town. Again, we're very much involved in the community. As I mentioned, I've been in the area for well over 20 years. When I was with the other company up the road there, I was very involved with the community. And we like to be, part of the community because we're a big part of it, and we want to be very good neighbors. Just a few things that we participated in the marker that was unveiled down by the courthouse here recently around the quiet conflict over the civil rights movement. And again, I'm the guy in the background there holding the umbrella for everybody to keep them dry. We also contributed to our fire departments here, both Glenn County and also the city of Brunswick recently, and I was very happy to be part of the team that received the Georgia let me get it right here. It's the World Trade Center Savannah's International Business of the Year Award. We received that award because we're one of the larger exporters in the state of Georgia. And again, most all of that material is going out of Savannah, Brunswick, and some out of Jacksonville. So it's, and again, I've been enjoying being here and being part of, we were working with the Economic Development Board to receive that award. So again, what you guys really wanted to talk, again, that's what we do. A big part of what we do, though, is all about the environment. Every day, every morning, we talk about how we operate. The first thing we talk about in what we call the morning meeting or the daily direction setting meeting, the first thing we talk about is safety. It is very important. I want to send everybody home injury-free every day, just the way they came. We don't want to have any injuries, particularly any life-altering injuries. The second thing we talk about in that meeting is environmental. So my two top priorities is one, sending everybody home safe, and the second one is not having a negative impact on the environment. As I said earlier, I'm an avid outdoorsman, so the environment is very important to me. So we talk about that. The third thing we talk about is quality, which impacts our customers, because if we don't take care of our customers, we won't stay in business. And then the fourth thing we talk about is production. So we put those things are all ahead of making tons. And I will tell you, I will shut the mill down, and I think Stephanie would back that up. I'll shut the mill down in a heartbeat if we're about to have some kind of environmental impact that's going to impact a violation of our permit, or more importantly, any impact on the river or the air quality. We have a ton of regulations that we have to operate under. The two we have here, you see full full-time employees that works with Stephanie to make sure that we're staying in compliance. The two big permits that we have to operate under is our what we call our Title V. That's our air permit that regulates all of our discharges through the stacks. And then the other one is the NPDES, or the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, and that's what regulates primarily our water discharge. And then we've got a number of solid waste permits, stormwater, spill prevention, facility response plans, EPA classified small generator for hazard. We are a small generator of hazardous waste, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We're regulated. We do have a few very low-level radioactive sources in the mill that we use for measuring density in materials, also for measuring the sonar that measures the height of tanks and that type of stuff. No exposure or concern to anybody, but they are regulated, and we have to manage that. And then we have, again, numerous inspections that occur both announced and unannounced. A little bit about what we discharge. So again, I talked about bringing the wood in. We take out the lignin and the hemicellulose. We evaporate that in what we call evaporators, and then we burn it in recovery boilers. So we recover like 90+% of that material and turn it into steam, which we use both steam and electricity in the process. So we generate, again, about 75% of the energy we use, we generate it with the mill, and then we buy the rest of that off the grid. From that, we have the product that goes to the customers, and then we have some wastewater that goes from that process. We take that wastewater, we put it through the large aeration and stabilization basin, and we have bacteria that's in that, or we call them bugs. We have bacteria in there that converts all the BOD into CO2 and oxygen, and so that we consume all that before we release that to the river. We have a permit to do that, and we use a lot of water. Our pulp and paper company is a big user of water, and on a given day we're about 30 million gallons a day. Is that right, Stephanie? We discharge. Happy to say that our treatment system today, though, is in the best condition it's been in a number of years, because we've spent a lot of money on dredging, and we're normally operating at 25% of our 30% of our permit discharge. So a lot of focus on that. So that consumes some of the stuff so that we consume it before it goes to the river. Also, we dredge out of the basin, and that material again is dead bugs, if you will, and also it's got some lime in it. We have a lime plant in the mill where we actually make lime to convert the cooking liquor back to white liquor, and from that we have a little bit of stuff. So this material that we dredge out of the lagoon contains lime and some other carbon type materials. Historically, the plants have put that in a landfill. But we have, again, because we've done a lot of improvements, we have no hazardous chemicals in that. We are able to actually reclaim that today, and we use it for agricultural usage, for growing trees, for growing soybeans or whatever. So basically, everything we bring in the mill, we are either making energy out of it, we're making product out of it, or we have this material that comes that's being dredged, it's being reused, and basically a complete cycle of going from a tree, taking all the components of the tree, processing them, putting it back in the land to grow more trees. And if you really think about the carbon cycle, where the trees are growing, they consume CO2. As we do the process, our boilers actually produce CO2 that goes back and gets consumed. So we got a complete cycle. And that's one of the advantages of the timber type businesses, that they are complete closed cycle. So that's a little bit about that. I think that, anything I missed on that? Again, I kind of got ahead of myself. We're talking about, this talks about the recycle. 85% energy consumed comes from our bark and our black liquor. Been very focused on water conservation. I mean, this mill, do we know historically how much water we used years ago? Was probably up to 40 or 50 million gallons a day. We were always looking for opportunities to reduce that. And then we talked about the beneficial reuse of our residuals. So from a landfill standpoint, the only thing that we're landfilling is basically industrial waste. It's like 2x4s or steel, and most of the steel we recycle. So we're a very small generator of waste that would be going into a landfill. Odor, that is one, historically, that has been a challenge for you guys that have been here a long time. You probably can remember when you smell the mill all the time. And that is because of the craft process. That's I told you a lot of positive things about the craft process. One of the negative things about the craft process is it generates hydrogen, low levels of hydrogen sulfide, and something called mercaptans. And the mercaptans, you can smell mercaptans at like 1 billion parts, 1 part per billion. It's very, very odoriferous. But over the years, we put in a lot of different systems to minimize that odor. And we do, still have some opportunities from time to time. If a system malfunctions shortly, you may smell the mill for a little bit, but we're working always to get it so you don't. The other thing that had been a problem, and I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, going back 4 or 5 years ago, the treatment system, the ASB, if we don't stay up with the dredging, we get the same kind of anaerobic activity going on that produces sulfur compounds that you get in the swamp. I mean, we live on the swamp. Sometimes you go out in the swamp, it's got that kind of rotten egg smell. We had the same kind of thing going on in our basins, but over the last 4 or 5 years, we've done a significant amount of dredging. We're in better shape now than we've been in a long time. So that has minimized, and we believe that we've significantly reduced the amount of odor that you experience offsite. And we're continuing to work on that. We do a lot of monitoring for H2S, and again, solids management, enhancing aerobic conditions, which minimizes the odoriferous compounds. And then we're also using a chemical that we actually inject in the sewer inside the mill in some of the streams that might have higher odor on them, again, to continue. And that's something that we're doing here that most mills don't do. Again, we're trying to be a good neighbor and minimize the impact that we have outside our fences. So that's kind of the presentation. I'll open it up to questions, and anything else you guys want to talk about?
Just make sure it's switched on for the people on Zoom.
Hello.
Oh,
Switch on stuff.
Yeah, blue lights.
I was curious. You said you discharge water from the facility. Is it possible to have a water treatment plant there that process it to reuse the water more?
We do. I don't know the number of that. That's such an easy question. I'll let Stephanie ask that one. But we reuse. You know the number? It's 40 or 50 times we reuse water before we actually discharge it. We use a lot of cooling water. We recycle that and recover it. And again, our intake is about 30 million gallons a day. That is groundwater because it's coming out of wells. And it goes we use it in the process, again, multiple times for cooling and everything. And then we finally discharge into the treatment system, and we treat it so that when we put it back in the river.
That's really great news. So it sounds like you don't use the Florida aquifer then?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, we do. We're taking out of the Florida aquifer and we're putting it in the river.
Oh, and not from the superficial aquifers though. Like,
No,
No,
ours
what-
are
we're-
400 to 600 feet into
Yeah.
the Floridian.
But I think
The
there
upper
used
Floridian.
to be, because the state of Georgia at one point in time, they put a moratorium on pulling out of the surface water.
Yeah, well, now, we have deep wells.
Deep
Yeah.
wells. Mhm.
Yeah. And it is better coming out of the Floridian aquifer. Because what happens is, and I don't know if people on Zoom can hear me, so don't mind passing that over. It's better to pull out of Floridian aquifer because there's more water. If you start pulling from shallow wells, what can happen is because we're so close to so much salt, the salt water comes back. And so the water tower that's actually in Perry Park was this is a long time ago, and it has nothing to do with Georgia Pacific, but more Pinova and their water extraction. It went salt. It turned salt because of that saltwater intrusion, because they were pulling too much water out of the surficial aquifer. We also have some ghost forests out near 99, like the more west part of our county, because that saltwater intrusion from, but this was like 20, 30 years ago. It was a long time ago that the state of Georgia put a moratorium for industry to be pulling from those surficial aquifers because they were just pulling too much. And the water 50 to 60 feet below was turning all salt. There wasn't enough fresh water. So,
Yeah, and some of the technology we're using at the facility is called RO, or reverse osmosis, where we take the water again after it gets a little dirty, we clean it up, we reuse it, and to minimize the overall impact. We have a lot of cooling towers too, where we can take the hot water and we cool it off, reuse it, as opposed to just discharging it to the river. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that you have this cycle of regrowth for the trees that you're using. This is a continuous process? You're not depleting the main source of trees from the areas?
No, ma'am. There's more. There's more pine trees today than there have been in my lifetime in this area. One of the things, kind of an indicator of that, the price of pine pulpwood today is about the same price it was in 1980. One of the things that the government did many years ago was the CRP program, where they were paying the farmers to take agriculture out of and put growing trees. As a result of that, we have a real surplus of yellow pine in all of the Southeast, and this area is no exception to that. So no shortage of us cutting down the forest and it going away. Like I said, most of 95% plus of our wood is coming off of these commercial or basically pine plantations. We're not in the swamp logging in the old growth hardwood or any of that material.
Can you repeat the question in your microphone? Sorry. The people on Zoom can't hear the question if you don't have a microphone.
Yeah. So.
I just wanted to know, how many logs does it take to make one bulk of paper?
One log. So the ratio between green wood. So if you take let's say you have a log that weighed 100 pounds, it would make about 25 tons of fluff pulp. So it's 1 to 4, and about 50% of that is water. So when you cut down a tree, it's about 50% water and about 50% solids. And then when we take the lignin and the hemicellulose out, just get down to the stuff that's like cotton, that's about 50% of the actual fiber that's there. So it's 1 to 4.
Great, go ahead.
I have maybe 3 questions, so I'm just going to ask my first one first. So you talked a whole lot about water and the recycling of water, but you mentioned air, but I didn't hear anything about air, like how your air permits, how those are available. And I was wondering, that's my first question.
Okay, so our air permits is regulated under Title V. And Stephanie, I'll let you answer that one because there's a lot of details in it.
There's a lot of details in a Title V permit. So you guys may be aware at Title V.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My van of white is not doing very good today.
So what a Title V permit is, in 1990, when the Clean Air Act was when in 1990, when the Clean Air Act was reauthorized, they realized that a lot of these rules and regulations did not have good reporting obligations in them. So when they reauthorized the Clean Air Act in 1990, they made an obligation to put all of your rules that your facility is subject to into a big permit. And that permit is all of the rules you're subject to, plus all of your authorized emission sources. And it made an obligation that Jack has to sign every 6 months with every time we don't meet a rule. So we operate 24/7, 365 days a year. We have to look at our operations for 1,440 minutes a day. And we have to look at every rule we're subject to, and we have to self-disclose if we met every rule or if we had any obligations we didn't meet. And that's called a Title V semi-annual deviation. Once a year, Jack has to certify that we are in compliance with all rules and regulations that the facility is subject to. And that's called our annual compliance certification. So in case you guys didn't know what a Title V was, many of you may know, but that's where Title V came from. And those are the reporting obligations that we have under Title V. Title V permits are public information. You guys could always take a look at a Title V permit for any facility and see what their monitoring and reporting obligations are.
Yeah, and we've got continuous monitoring on all of our stacks. It's monitoring 24/7. We have to do compliance tests to make sure that those meters are calibrated. Again, we're emitting CO2. I mean, when you do this process, we're emitting CO2, but we have to report all these regulations. The things that you guys are most interested in is what we call reduced sulfur compounds. That's what you would smell if you had an odor coming from the mill. And we have very low limits on those. And we have multiple ways to incinerate those so that we don't discharge those. And that's the difference in a pulp mill today than a pulp mill from 30 years ago. There was no collection or incineration of those things. They were just all going to the atmosphere.
Okay, second question is dealing with, I guess, how you all are having meetings here and the involvement of the communities that are around your facility and them having the same information or the same opportunity to have a conversation with you on their concerns.
And back in, I don't know if you guys remember, but in March of 22, we had a public meeting. We announced it in the newspaper and asked for people to come and talk to us from Georgia Pacific about odor and ponds and, you know, what we were doing. And unfortunately, it wasn't well attended. So we could do another one. We would be glad to do another one, but you know, folks have to attend for us to have the individual conversation with them. But we're happy to do it. We've done it once before. We're here talking to you guys today, and you know, another public venue would be fine with us as well.
CJ, you want to say us a little bit about the CAP?
Oh, and our Citizens Advisory Panel. I didn't mention that.
Sorry.
Thank you, Rachel. So you asked about community engagement, right? So we definitely want to know what's on the minds of our nearest next door neighbors. So especially in the past couple of years, we have made a above and beyond effort to get to know what's on the minds of the people who live nearest the mill, our nearest next door neighbors. So in addition to what we've already discussed, we've established last August what's known as a Citizen Advisory Panel, or a CAP. And that's a group of about 24 community leaders. Mr. Robinson is one of them. We meet about once a quarter, and we give presentations and updates about what's going on in the mill to that group. Now, it's not a public meeting. It's not a town hall meeting, but it's a group of the mayor, chairman of the county commission, the county manager, leaders of nonprofit organizations from throughout Brunswick and Glynn County. We gather them together. We host a lunch meeting at a central location in Brunswick, and we explain to them, hey, what's going on at the mill, and answer their questions. And so far, that's been very well received. And we try to hold that about once a quarter or so.
Yeah, and the plan, it was a request in the plan, we have that next meeting, we're actually going to hold it at the mill and we're going to do a tour so that group can actually see what we do more than just talk about it. And again, our hope is because we have a very diverse group that they take that information back to their communities and to their groups and we spread the word.
Okay. And I guess the last one is a comment and maybe a suggestion into, sounds great that we actually have community involvement and we're doing these meetings and we have seemed like the right attendance on, at least on the community involvement boards or whatever they're called.
Mhm.
That's great. But when we take the information back, something I learned in school is that you have to really know your audience. And concern is, and maybe a recommendation is just like in here, I don't know, maybe this group do know about drudging and all that good stuff, but the average person probably won't. So maybe in lieu of that, maybe to ensure that the basics of what we're talking about is understood first. And it seems like these people are actually coming, these leaders. So that means that they're regularly attending these meetings, meaning that you have their audience, you have their attention. But when I mostly find when you start talking about environmental stuff, they don't know the basics. So they'll sit there and say, yeah, we got it. But then they don't know how to regurgitate that back or even to put it in simpler form so people can understand. That is very important. It's called risk communication. You got to be able to do that, or you're going to have what we call upset citizens and they cause problems. I mean, they're gonna take you to the ringer because it's not because they don't, well, yeah, it does build distrust too. So in order to gain that, we have to really be careful on using risk communication and actually what we're giving and taking those steps to make sure that the leaders know. Because I can tell you now, probably a couple of leaders will be like, yeah, sure, we went to the meeting and everything else, but have no clue what the heck is drudging. You know, I only know because I'm a science major. So I kind of can follow, but your average citizen, you have to look at them as they really don't know what it is. So I'm hoping that is not in the efforts that you all are making, just a consideration to make sure that there are other opportunities to kind of break down exactly what that means, to include down to recycling, because what you're doing is pretty much recycling, like you said, to go ahead and bear that energy so that way it won't go into any one of the environmental areas, whether it's water, air, whatever. But you have to know the audience that you're in the area that you're in. Most people don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, fair statement. And I've been doing this for 35 years. And I mean, it's just a lot of the terms are so common to me and sometimes we forget that, right? But that's a very good point.
Okay, I've got 2 Zoom questions for you. They're from my mom. She's gonna be like, why you gotta say that? Okay. No. She wants to know how many manufacturing machines or how many lines that do you have to produce the rolls of fluff?
Okay. So hi mom.
Yeah.
Hope you're doing well today.
Yeah, you already have your own microphone, so
We have 3 paper machines, if you will. We call them. They're really fluff dryers. We have 3 paper machines, but beyond that, we originally had 2 lines. And once upon a time, this facility didn't make fluff pulp. It made actually bleach board and fluff pulp. But in around 2000, it was converted. So we got the 3 paper machines. We had 2 lines back in those days when we were making bleach board. We actually used hardwood. We used hardwood on one of the lines and pine on the other. So we had 2 lines for a number of years. In 2012, the bleaching process, we converted those 2 lines into a single line. And in October of this year, the brown stock washing part of that, we still have 2 lines today, but it's going to be single line. And this is, again, the investment that we're making that's going to be starting in October is over $200 million investment in this facility to make it more efficient. It's going to make us more energy efficient, and it also is going to put less biological oxygen demand to the waste treatment system once we put this new equipment in. So long story short, the fiber line will be a single line in October, and we have 3 drying machines that convert it into the rolls that we sell.
She comes from the world of manufacturing. She's a process chemist, or again, she's retired, but she, with pharmaceuticals in New Jersey. So I think that's where how many lines? Okay. And then one of the other questions is, do you guys ever have to do a shutdown for maintenance or repairs?
So we typically do what we call an annual shutdown. In this past year, we did that in the month of March. Our next annual shutdown will be the 15th of February in 2025. It is a really big deal. We will have north of 3,000 contractors in the mill. Those outages usually last anywhere from the shortest one would be 7 days. A typical one's about 2 weeks, and sometimes they go longer than that. We're going to have actually a very big one coming up in February. We're going to be replacing electrical equipment, and we'll actually have the lights out for like 10 days completely. So we're doing a lot of planning and preparation. And just to give you order of magnitude, that outage we had last year, we spent like $45 million on that downtime.
Hi, I'm Maggie with Altamaha Riverkeeper. 2 questions. First one, what are the circumstances that cause the mill to over emit? So in conditions like you mentioned earlier, where there is more stink coming out of the stacks, you said that because there's been an issue in the mill that causes that, you're over emitting, I'm assuming, if that occurs, or maybe you're still under your limit, but the smell increases. What are the circumstances that cause that?
You could be under your limit, but because hydrogen sulfide has such a low odor threshold, you could actually be under your reporting obligations, under your Title V obligations, but you can still smell it because you can smell it above it's about 0.5 parts per billion. And that's 0.5 parts of hydrogen sulfide in a billion parts of air. You can still smell it. So it has a very low odor threshold. So those could be times where we're still operating under our authorized limits, but there could be a smell. The other way that there could be smell to come from the mill is we talked about the wastewater pond. So anaerobic bacteria underneath solids in the ponds, and this could happen in the swamps or the marshes too. It's a naturally occurring process. Anytime you get solids, you can get bacteria that don't need oxygen. And the things they put off is hydrogen sulfide is one of the gases it puts off. It smells like rotten eggs. Smells really bad. Well, we will have the same thing happen in the wastewater pond. Now we're actively dredging. We dredge anywhere from 8,000 to 10,000 tons out of our ponds every month. We are actively trying to wrap up our dredging project and get to a stable place where we don't dredge anymore. But even if the process is operating normally, if we had a pocket of something that was an under deposit, anaerobic bacteria kind of activity going on, we could be fully compliant in the mill with all of our operating processes, and you could still smell it. So those are some ways that there could be smells. I'm trying to think of other ways. If we had a piece of equipment go down, or if we had a pump to go down that's supposed to be moving processes forward, that could be another way that something could go into an upset condition and there might be a smell coming from the mill. I'm just trying to think of general scenarios that there could be times when there could be smell coming from the mill. But we do take it seriously, both from our employees, if they tell us they're smelling something, if people outside the mill tell us they're smelling something, we investigate with Georgia EPD. We'll go out in the community looking for it to see evidence of it, or to find out if we can determine what the source is of the smell in the community. But we do take it seriously, and we do try to prevent it with everything that we do.
All right, thank you. My second question is on your wastewater permit. It's up for renewal in the process. We're waiting on the very unknown time of when it's going to post. Have you all done anything proactive to reduce your discharge so that these limits are going to decrease in the new permit, whether that be the color discharge limit or any of the contaminants that are allowed in your discharge?
So we have not asked for a reduction. However, We have optimized our wastewater treatment plant. It's 151 acres of water. It's called an aeration stabilization basin. It basically is where we put the biological mass in, it eats up the BOD, and then we discharge. Our normal discharge is about 40% of our permitted limit. But we would not be asking for, a decrease in our discharge. We have applied for the permit. We're under continuance right now until the state actually writes a draft permit. But I would say the things we've done proactively are the nutrient feed of the bacteria in the aeration stabilization basin, keep that nice and healthy, keep it where it needs to be so that it can work as it's supposed to take care of all the BOD. That's the biggest thing we've done this year. And that is a lot of money spent on that, on the health of the biological treatment. We spend a lot of money on that.
Yep.
Close to probably $1 million a year, keeping that healthy, keeping it operating, keeping it doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. The other thing that we've been working on in the last 6 months or so, the last 6 months is just overall reliability. If we have a failure, that has the potential to put things in the sewer that we have to treat, and that is certainly improved. Again, I think you can attest to that. The stability of our system is improved. And I mentioned the $200 million investment we're making in the brown stock washing. That is going to reduce the amount of biological demand that goes to the bleach. It goes to the bleach plant, ultimately that goes out. So that is going to be a reduction as well. So that's part of that. So we are working to get that down. And again, my goal is to have enough headroom in our permits so that we never have to report anything, and we're not having impact on the community.
No, we've been calling and talking to Georgia EPD. I'm sorry, we've been asking about the status of our permit for quite a while now. It's our understanding that Georgia EPD is struggling with manpower and resources to get the permits out, but it would have been our preference to have it issued last year, prior year. I mean, we don't like continuance either. We like certainty and we'd like the permit issued. And unfortunately, they just don't have the manpower to get it out right now.
So we have one more question on Zoom, and then I have a question, but I did want to let you know it's 12:59. So are you good?
I'm
Okay.
good.
Okay. Just making
Thank
sure. So we have how many times per year are you inspected, and by whom from outside the company?
Sure. So once a year, we have Georgia EPD, local Georgia EPD officials come to the mill and inspect our landfills. So we mentioned on the environmental slide, we have 2 landfills. One is closed, one is still open, and they will come and inspect the landfills. They give you a score from 0 to 100, depending on, and 100 is good and 0 is bad. Our last inspection, even though it's quite unheard of, we got 100 on our landfill inspection, which means we're meeting our compliance obligations. We're doing what the state would expect us to do. On some less routine frequency, we'll get air permit inspections. They'll come out of Atlanta and they'll come to the mill and they'll go through our Title V permit, and they'll determine if we're meeting our compliance obligations, doing our reporting correctly, if they agree with the reports that we filed so far. So those are not scheduled, but they usually happen like once every other year on the air side. On the wastewater side, we will typically get once a year. The wastewater engineer will come, the wastewater Georgia EPD representative will come to the mill. In addition to the environmental department, I also have a laboratory department that reports to me, and they do the environmental testing to make sure that we're in compliance with the permit. And so when Georgia EPD comes to the mill, they'll inspect the lab. They'll make sure we're doing the testing correctly, that we're reporting correctly. They'll go look at the wastewater discharge. They'll look at all of our DMRs, which are your discharge monitoring reports. And they don't give us a score necessarily, but if they find any issues, they'll let us know and we'll have to fix them. the last 3 inspections on wastewater, I don't believe we've had any findings, but if that's important to somebody, I could let you guys know, but I don't believe we've had any findings on that.
Okay, I've got a question for you guys, and then we got one over here, and then we'll maybe try to do last call. So I know that most of the hydrogen sulfide monitoring was voluntary, which is, it's good. You guys not waiting for the state or the EPA to require you to do it. So we do appreciate that. But is there a requirement for you to share that data with the agency since it is voluntary? And also, considering our organization is going to be looking at doing some community monitoring, is there an opportunity for that data to be shared with the public so it can be incorporated as we start asking our own questions with regard to community monitoring?
Okay, so we have, I want to make it clear, we have both required hydrogen sulfide monitoring that is required, and it's in the permit. So we have stacks, and they have what are called TRS monitors on the stacks. That data is reviewed by the agency, shared with the agency, available to the agency at all times. We do have another set of data that is area monitoring, and that area monitoring data is voluntary. And so that data is just data that we look at to determine if an upset has happened, or if we are having an odor complaint, we'll take a look at it. But as voluntary data, we're not providing it to anyone. We're just using it for our purposes to determine if we've had an upset, or if we are the source of an odor complaint. So I want to make sure there's 2 different kinds, and there is already access to the TRS data by the agency. Okay.
It was not the best question. But where is your website so we can actually see, or we can get to these reports?
Oh, into the reports, you would have to go to Georgia EPD to see them.
Okay.
But yeah, all reports are submitted to the EPD, and they are obligated to make it available to the public. And I don't know what mechanism they use to do that, but that's their obligation to do.
Okay, so that's separate from the reports that you said. That's what you were saying, public reports and okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
we submit to EPD. You guys would have to go through EPD to get access to them.
Okay.
And I don't know what mechanism they use for that, but they're obligated to do it.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm guessing Rachel knows that.
The state of Georgia has, and of course there's too many acronyms, so I don't remember what it stands for, but it's GEOS, something online system. I know the OS. So, but that's where a lot of permit. So like we were talking about the NPDES permit, I think is the one that's up for renewal. So when the state is ready to issue, or, have public notice, a lot of the permit application documents will be on there. I'm not sure if they have compliance reports on there, but I could at least point you to the direction of that database, and then you can peek around and see. And if you can't find it, yeah. So the state, I will say, since COVID has gotten a lot better. I do still think there's more room for improvement, always. As part of what my job is to be here for, looking for those rooms for improvement. But they've gotten a lot better at getting documents online in an online repository, which makes it a lot easier for the general public to access it. But pre-COVID, a lot of times you had to go to Atlanta. And for us here in Glenn County, that's 600 miles, there and back. So we are appreciative that they are trying to get things mostly online. Did we have any final questions? Any final questions from Zoom? And if not, thank you so much to our speakers. Give them a round of applause. And you guys enjoy the rest of your lunch. And I know Jack will be scooting off, but Stephanie and CJ will be hanging out if there are any follow-up little questions that pop up in your head as we're wrapping up. Thank you guys all so much.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it up.
Thank you.